So I have, and welcome to this sort of report where I did the photo assignment from Ted Forbes, who is known as the Art of Photography in his YouTube channel. And about a month ago in November, he gave this assignment to his viewers to use one lens. And it seems like an interesting assignment, and of course a pretty good thing to try out. And this is for the entire month. And so the focal length that I chose to go for was this adapted Olympus OM 50mm. Usually when I go out wanting to keep things as small as possible, I would use my 50mm f2 or some other lenses, or even the zoom lens 18 to 55. But we can see, like, if I want to use it at 50mm, I'll have to like keep it at this length at all times, which is not very portable. So using a photo Dusk adapter, the lens becomes around this big. And just to compare another lens, which maybe in a future video I will compare like with another 50mm VV-tar lens that I have. And do know that there is a small filter thread, so the size comparison isn't exactly equal, but with the filter, the VV-tar right now looks a little bit longer, but the Olympus does seem to be much wider at the end point. But this isn't a comparison video yet, so I'd like to talk about the 50mm on this Olympus lens. Now putting it on my Fuji X-T1 around this size. So with this adapter, it does sort of become a little bit larger, and not too large, but it's no longer, I would say, that portable lens and compact form factor that a lot of Fujifilm user might desire. This sort of brings to the idea of using those third-party lenses that are made for rangefinder cameras, or other vintage lenses that are made for rangefinder cameras, and so the flange distance or the adapter here doesn't, or is not as big here. But regardless, another challenge that I wanted to give myself is to actually zone focus with this 50mm, which they call me a madman, and to be honest, a friend did call me mad for trying to zone focus with a 50mm. But that is a question that I wanted to answer myself of, like, since most people, it's either zone focusing with a 28 in full frame or 35, and that might be as far as they go. But I wanted to experiment for myself of, like, why not just zone focus with a 50 as well. So if we do take a look, usually people would zone focus at f4, so we start at f4. If we set it to infinity, at f4 it is around 10 meters to 4 meters, and then at 8 it will be from infinity to 5 meters, and then if you go all the way to 16, it is around 2.5 meters till infinity. And of course, a lot of you might say, like, oh, if you stop down all the way down to 16, then we would get other distortions in the lens, or things will start become soft, which is sort of true. You have to sort of give and take when trying to do this kind of experiment. So sometimes I just keep it at f8, and sometimes I do go down to all the way to f16, and I like to just show some of the images that I do like, and specifically some of the images where if I did not zone focus at all, then it would be near impossible to capture the image in the first place. instead of trying to manual focus. It would be impossible to manual focus. So zone focusing, I think, is an option. Just understand that, of course, since you're using a more tailored lens, and maybe it's even more tailored with this crop format with the APS-C instead of using a 35mm film, your in focus range will be much smaller compared to a wide angle lens. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the realization of the APS-C crop compared to the 35mm full frame with the 50mm. I don't have a full frame camera, but I do have my film camera as a reference point, and using this 50mm with the Olympus camera really gave me like a wider field of view, obviously, to most of you who like have been taking photos for a much longer period of time. But for some reason, and I knew this at the back of my mind, of course, but during this month of just using this 50 all the time, it just somehow just clicked up like, wow, this is really more zoomed in than I'm used to when imagining the 50mm field of view on the film camera. And so this is like really that 75 field of view, which I would wonder then, do I sort of personally like 75mm, or I think most other lenses would be made at the 85 to 90mm mark than using a 50 when talking about full frame lenses. So if I wanted to go wide, I am sort of more comfortable with the 24 equivalent or 28. Haven't experimented much at the 35 yet, but if I want to go wide, I just go wide at 24, 28, and then if I want something that's more tele-portrait orientated, then I'll just go straight to the 85 or 90 and then just skip the 50 altogether. This is just the questions that I'm having right now when considering what focal length I do like or prefer. With that said, I will be going to the next section of showing some of the photos and talking about it. This is just to present the lens and some of the photos that I'm okay with, and if you want to see more photos, there will be some links below to where I have posted them on my Facebook page. So with that said, want to go with the first photo here, where I was just outside, and then it was a very rare occasion to find a Google Maps person in my area, most likely to update the Google Maps since there has been new constructions and development. And with this image, the blues contrasting with the red bus in the background, I think is pretty nice, and the different people on the bus are nicely framed and not cut off due to the flag or any other thing. And the one question I would like to ask is whether the grass is a little bit distracting, and something that I have posted in another Facebook group called Advancing Your Photography, where they have a couple of live streams talking about it, and it was very insightful, and I'm very thankful for that. So I'm openly asking here again whether the grass being green is a distracting factor or not. In this case, I try to desaturate and reduce the brightness a bit, but not too much that it then becomes distracting, that it's overly processed, in which case based on the feedback, it was not clear that it was overly edited as well, which I'm quite happy about. But regardless, the pose of the person isn't too interesting, so I suppose the only interesting factor is just that this is a Google Maps system, and that blues and red are contrasting. There's a few other photos that I made in black and white that might have a more interesting poses that shows the person setting up the camera, but I don't think it's much of a conversational image to present in this video. Moving on quickly, I found this sort of bug, not sure what it is, maybe a ladybug, but I don't think it wasn't red, so I don't think it was a ladybug. But this is the 50 at 1.8, and you can sort of see the blurriness in the background and being as close focus as much as possible. And checking in the camera, it was a little bit not sharp in my opinion, or not happy with it. And so just to testing it out, I tried with a higher aperture, and now we can sort of start to see the more rectangular bokeh in the background. And this might be a little bit too clarified or too sharpened, so I don't remember how I processed this image. And so a secondary image here, still a little bit higher aperture, but maybe not as high as this one. This is like going like full maybe f11, while this is still maybe f8 or f4 compared to the 1.8. and so everything is still quite soft, and still the insect itself is relatively sharper, which I think this is the better picture out of the three, but you guys can let me know down below. This one is the first one where I was testing out the zone focusing with the 50 for fun, and as you can see, it's just a incoming motorcycle on the sidewalk, and there's no way that most people would try to do 1.8 or maybe f4 to catch like a moving target coming towards you. Might be quite difficult. So here most likely at f11 they just come into the zone, and then I captured the shot with the high shutter speed and then got them in frame. This one I'm a little bit happier because the people are feeling the frame much more, and it's like a interesting culture of people riding a motorcycle in a unique way. And this is in a small sidewalk, soy or street, so it's not too dangerous. But I like this one much better, especially that the people are looking towards the camera and they have like their own expressions. This one as well, also zone focusing. The person on the right hand side like coming into frame into the light, and then the pillar like framing him, and then him wearing his mask, though not totally perfect, not gonna criticize that, but it's sort of like wearing his mask while the two people are like maybe too close to each other. You take it as you will. This next one, maybe I push the aperture all the way to 16, and this is sort of where the sharpness might fade out a little bit, and maybe in this case I was still a little bit too close to the trees for the background seems to be much sharper. But I do like sort of this tree where the trees seem to have started to grow into the barbed wires, and it's sort of a tree that I like to take photos whenever I visit this area. Another tree that I find to be quite interesting, this one is not zone focus by the way, and just how it just seems like this center part has been crushed, and just how it sort of bends along with each other, and I just sort of like the texture. This next one was zone focus whilst I was in the car, but though I was parked at the time, and just after looking at the photo a second time, which wasn't exactly on purpose, it's just how the framing of the letters, cutting a word behind, but all we have is the context of F box, and you like usually would know whenever they try to censor words what the F words mean, and just sort of how this is just a giant box and a few other boxes framing the person working. Another one before the previous photo where this is also zone focus, and since I was sort of stretching my hand out to try to take the photo, couldn't really see the screen particularly well to frame, just sort of see the general shape of the large sandbags and the other person. So it's only after the photo was taken that when I checked back, I happened to catch the guy's face right in the mirror, which I'm quite happy about. Another zone focus, where just time to time you see sort of workers sitting right at the back of the pickup truck during highways, and it can be quite dangerous, and that's just like how people live and work from time to time. But I don't really like this wide framing. I'm a big fan of like just wide framing shots that sometimes it just takes over, but I don't really like this one. I'm most likely gonna go back and change it to be some kind of a square crop, and then use this pillar here as sort of a framing mechanism. But in any case, all of the framing lines would then be pointing towards this car and not this car. So in this case, it's just not the right moment. This one is another event and no zone focusing, for it's like dusk around 6 p.m. and the sun is going down, and so I'll be manual focusing here and just pushing at 1.8 because I don't want to have my ISO too high and still have a decent fast shutter speed. But I sort of selected this photo because I just like how like he's all in black, and then the black shirt just sort of frames his nice tattoo right there for you to sort of see, and it just sort of pops up and just frames his arm right here. Another one here where just showing the 1.8, and it's like 1.8 is sort of decently fast. You don't need to go down to like or have a 1.4 1.2 kind of lens, and so I'm like quite satisfied with this kind of bokeh. But here I just like how it's like his hat is black, this other guy is sort of clearly white, and I sort of wish that his mask was actually white to have sort of this yin yang contrast of like white hat, black mask, and then black mask, white hat. And I just sort of see that sort of potential, which sort of just sort of close to the finish line but not quite there. So they had like a sort of mini concert where a band came to play, and sort of just trying to shoot the band doing their thing. And since this is a open market, just sort of now it's starting to get really dark, so try to use the lights from each of the shops to sort of light up the subjects, and then wait for like an expression or certain emotion to happen. This one was a very crazy lighting that's just shining up on him that I find to be like interesting, that I rarely see, so might as well capture to see how the light affects his face and bring shadow towards other areas. This one's another one at 1.8, just trying to focus on this guy and just everyone else being blurred in the background, though I really don't like this bokeh ball down here. That's very distracting and doesn't make him look all that great. This one is a pretty funny one where I was trying to like take a picture of the dog, and then only after taking the picture I noticed the guy just staring at me as if he like caught me in the act, and then and like him next to the bear is like I just sort of relate him to the bear of like this scary large bear, since he's like really large compared to like the dog and like the other people in the background. But even funnier that his reflection is just perfectly placed at the bottom of the frame as well, and just how like it just framed from top to bottom. And so it kind of like I like this photo a little bit, though it doesn't have that kind of harmony, but it just sort of makes me smile of how it's framed like from top to bottom. For the final shots of just sort of some cats in the area, just like to take photos of animals and cats whenever I can, and so trying to do this negative composition where he's just on the corner here and then just looking out towards sort of something we don't know. This other day the cat was just sitting, and then the sun was just shining right perfectly on his face and just sort of sitting still, and I got to catch a couple of photos that just the light is just really nice. And this is maybe like at f4, so from the previous insect photos. So if I learned like, oh, you don't need to like go a full 1.8 when you're like that close, you want a little bit of depth of field, so maybe going at f4, and the light shining on the cat's face is already so bright. As you can see, I barely did any editing this like black background even though it's full daytime, because he's in the shadow under a roof, and only this one light source is catching him. This is almost not edited at all, just slightly sharpened to like get the furs to pop up a little bit more. And this one is just really focused on the eye and back at the ears. But even I think this one was still at f4. I don't think I pushed down to f8. But even at f4, because it's like focus on the eye and the focus range is, or depth of field is the eye to the ear, his sort of nose became out of focus, which I don't know if that's like a bad thing per se, but just something to consider of how when trying to like shoot very close, the depth of field gets really shallow. And this isn't like as close as I could get with the Olympus 50mm, just trying to frame like the ears and everything within the frame, so I don't need to push too far to like get as close as possible. It's just still consider the framing and composition comes first, of course. And that's all the photos that I want to show for this series of one lens for 1 month challenge by the YouTube channel Art of Photography. And up next that I want to challenge myself is actually to find a zone focus with the 50mm where I can like take portraits like this of people, maybe not this close of course, but when you do the zone focus of infinity to 1 meter or whatever zone it is. I don't have the lens with me, hold on a second. So if it's, let's say, f8, your zone focus for on the 50mm is 5 meters to infinity. So 5 meters, even though they're at closest distance, isn't going to give you this sort of portrait style. So I want to like find a zone that's maybe 2.5 meters to 5 meters and try to take photos that way as a personal challenge that I will try to do in the future. That said, if you like, do subscribe, for I will be trying to make more videos in the near future, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now.